Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Velero community meeting / open discussion. My name is Jonas Rosland. I'll be your moderator here today. And with us, of course, we have the Velero team and the Velero community members. So we got a bunch of stuff that we want to talk about today on the agenda here. So let me share the agenda link in the chat for anyone if you want to add in your any notes or discussion topics, please do so in there, and I'll share my screen as well so you can see it. All right, so today is March 10th, 2020, and on status updates, we'll start with Ashish.
I've been working on like the CSI integration with Velero, basically using Velero to perform backup and restores of applications that use CSI volumes. The backup and restore will use like the V1 Beta 1 Snapshot APIs to do the backup and restore stuff. Right now, the current state, this is all using the velero-plugin-for-csi. Right now, I am able to use the plugin to perform like backup and restores in cluster and also like cross-cluster migration scenarios. I've been running tests using the host path plugin. I have a live demo on this later, so I will talk more about it. The other thing that I kind of figured out was a few issues that I opened up in like the Upstream external snapshotter and also in the Velero repo, mainly around how to perform or how to perform volume snapshots in a programmatic fashion rather than somebody sitting at a keyboard and doing the snapshots to kind of make that workflows more smoother. So feel free to like look through the issues and add some comments and like feel free to chime in there. And I also realized just before this meeting that my issues in the Velero repo are not very descriptive, so I will add more details on that, on those issues. Yeah, and that's I also included a link to our plugin repo. So feel free to jump in and contribute PRs, issues, comments, code reviews, testing, anything you can do. It'll be awesome.
And I'll toss in there. We have they're a little bit split there, but we have issues tagged as CSI across the plugin repo and the main core repo. So if you want to jump in and help there, we do have issues kind of spread between both places. Just so if you want to find some of the work that we have planned.
I've got two quick questions, Ashish. First of all, I guess, do you feel like you're in a state where it would be worthwhile for folks to start doing testing on the plugin, or not quite yet?
No, not like production quality testing, but just kind of functionality verification and see if there is something in their workflow that we might have missed to kind of identify gaps.
So as of right now, I guess what's merged into master in the plugin repo is backup, right? So creating snapshots during a Velero backup.
Yes.
And the restore side is
like close to getting merged. So
okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, and I'm totally aware that we've still got lots of work before it's production ready, but if we can start getting it in the hand of folks and saying, hey, we don't have all the bells and whistles implemented, but basic backup and restore is sort of in place.
Yeah,
be great to get feedback from as many folks as possible.
Yeah, that's the whole idea.
Yeah. And then my second question was just on the upstream issues that you filed. Are any of these blocking for the functionality that we want, or are these more nice to haves?
The first one is kind of blocking, but we have a workaround for that. Like we need to go do some cleanup before we are able to restore. So that's the. I'm going to bring this up during the volume snapshot working group meeting as well. So.
Okay, but we have a workaround.
Yeah, we have a workaround. Yep.
Okay, I haven't gotten a chance to look at these issues in detail yet, but I'll do that. Try and do that later today.
Yep. Yeah, Nolan and I spoke about it yesterday, and we opened up issues.
Okay. Okay, that's all from me.
Awesome. Any other questions, comments for Ashish? All right. Khaleesi isn't on yet, so we'll wait with her status update. Me, I've been out sick, so I'm gonna skip my update too. I'm gonna jump over to Nolan.
So last week we got a report on version 1.3.0 that one of the bugs that Scott Sego had reported in the beta, I believe, or maybe it was in 1.2, that the int float conversion on CRDs actually popped up in another location. So I fixed that last week. Thank you to Guy333 and Nissis Sanap for the reports and the data. Turned out I was using the same problematic function in a different location. And Upstream talked a little bit more to Jordan Liggett. Not sure if we're going to get any closer to resolving it upstream. But in the meantime, Velero is going to have to carry backwards compatible code anyway. So that fix is now merged. And hopefully in the discussion topics, we'll talk about getting a 1.3.1 release out. But thank you to the folks for reporting that. Also, got a report last week of some node validation or node port validation errors that this issue 2308 basically looked like the expectation was that the error should come back as already exists from Kubernetes server, and therefore Velero should report it as the service is a duplicate. So therefore it should continue with the store just and not report this error. But it turns out Kubernetes with node ports, if you have the same port number allocated, it returns validation error, not an already exists error. And this is due to the way ports and IP addresses are allocated in Kubernetes. So there's no fix for that, but I spent a few hours digging through the Kubernetes code to figure out why it was returning a different error. So this is in the contributor shoutouts, but thank you, Anthony Vett, for tracking that down with a reproduction case so I could go in and find that. We had a discussion about some approaches that we could do there. And then I started working on uploading CSI artifacts in the core Velero repo. This is to get some of our client code working on par with our other snapshot types. So like our rustic snapshots and our Velero native snapshots can, if you do Velero backup or restore describe -- details, you can get the types of snapshots in there. This will facilitate that and also some garbage collection logic. So I got start on that work. And then last week I had asked by proxy for Michael and Steve, we've been asked to go through the unprioritized backlog, help build a roadmap, and I did not do that, so I need to go do that this week.
Oh man, that's a huge miss, Nolan.
That is a huge miss.
I'm just kidding. Hey, but by the way, so Steve and myself and team did some of that work, and we added already some items in the backlog. Obviously, you guys work in the weeds every day, so we want to bottoms up bring up some cases and issues that you guys feel are important that will enable our users.
Yep.
Awesome. Any questions, comments for Nolan? All right, I think Carlisia is on now. So Carlisia, do you want to run through your status updates?
Yes, I am on. Sorry, I had movers here. So I was out last week because I was moving, get a new office now. And I am on support, yeah. I'm on support this week and catching up on PR reviews. I think I'll be caught up today. And I pushed an update to the CLI PR, pushed it this morning. It has the YAML and customized files that it has one folder that has the original deployment YAML, and you can deploy it with customize. And then it has a proof of concept folder where the Velero deployment is separate from the plugin deployment. I mean, the Velero deployment, but the plugin section of it, and also the secret is in a separate file. So it's basically customize allows you to just batch the Velero deployment. And I tested that with two plugins being patched into the Velero deployment. And I only used the backup storage location. I didn't bother with the volume because it's just to get an idea of the flow. And then I'm gonna do start updating the actual text in that design document. That's it for me.
Awesome. This is a big redesign here. What do you need from other members of the team and the community for this?
Once I update the PR, the design proposal itself, then I'm gonna need another review for sure.
All right, we'll make sure to make some noise in the Slack channels about that then.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any other questions, comments for Carlisia? All right, Steve.
Yeah, a few different things. So last week I've mentioned a couple of these, so just updates on them. So I had been working on some refactoring of our restore code around kind of the discovery API and how we deal with CRDs and all that. And so I got that PR finalized, so it finished up with some testing and a little bit of changes to the code. So it's up there ready for review. I think everyone has already taken a look at it, and I think I addressed the last comment. So it's probably ready for merge unless anyone has any other comments. The next thing I was working on was some refactoring to extract a lot of the logic that's currently in the controllers out into packages, and particularly starting with the backup and restore code. So the first PR, which was just sort of a prereq for getting this done around the Informer cache lifecycle, has been merged. And then I've been working on extracting the backup code that does a lot of the validation and defaulting for the API objects as they're coming in, move that into the backup package. So that's still a work in progress. I worked on it a little bit last week and then got not distracted, but I was working on some other things. So I hope to pick this back up this week. And I think we have some naming decisions to make, but we can iterate through that in the PR.
Sounds good.
And what else do I have on here? Yeah, it's been a couple of days. A user reported a bug or an issue with the Azure plugin where backups that were larger than 256 megs failed to upload. So it turns out that Azure has restrictions in their blob storage. So you can only, basically if you have objects or blobs that you're trying to upload that are larger than 256 megs, you need to break it into chunks of no larger than 100 megs each and upload individual chunks, and then upload a list of the IDs of the chunks to make up the overall blob. So this user was running into it because they're backing up very large clusters. So I was working on this. I think I got it implemented. I was able to push out an image that this person could test and verified fixed their issue. And so, yeah, I think this one's ready for review as well. All my testing looked good. It looked good from the user's perspective. So ready for review from maintainers.
So is this for backups being sent to Azure object stores?
Yeah.
And the Azure object store doesn't handle that chunking itself?
It does not.
That is super weird.
Does this impact Rustic that you know of? I would assume it would, but I guess I don't know if they handle it internally.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know if Rustic has code to do chunking or if Rustic actually uploads any objects that are that big. I think their packs tend to be smaller than that, but I'm not totally sure. Might be worth looking into a little bit, but you know, if there was an issue, it would require changes in the Rustic code base. It's probably not something we could work around in Velero.
Right.
Yeah.
We couldn't do anything. I'm not aware of any controls that we could tweak, but yeah, we would have to issue patches to Rustic and wait for them to do anything with it.
Yeah, and I mean, I would say, you know, a Velero backup that's larger than 256 megs is pretty uncommon. That would require a lot of cluster objects. Now, I think what this user was running into, I think it was mentioned in here, but it might have been a Slack thread, is that by default, events get backed up, Kubernetes events, because they're just another API resource. And this user, given that they had a very large cluster, had a huge number of events. And so a large percentage of the backup size was due to those events, which probably don't need to be backed up because they're sort of ephemeral things anyway. You know, excluding events is one possibility to bring down the backup size, but still, this is something that we should support. We shouldn't have an arbitrary limit on backup size just due to not working with the Azure Blob Store API correctly. So anyway, ready for review.
Do you know if any other providers are imposing similar restrictions?
That's a good question. I know AWS supports like multi-part upload, so you can chunk things and upload individual chunks, but I don't believe they have a requirement that you do that. Mm-hmm. But it's probably worth looking into at least for AWS and GCP for the other two plugins we maintain, and making sure we wouldn't have similar issues there.
Yeah, makes sense.
And yeah, lots of reviews. There have been many you know, issues, feature requests, PRs coming in across the different repos. So that's been keeping me busy as well.
Cool. Any questions or comments for Steve? Anyone have any experience with other blob storage that does not support more than 256 megs? All right, we'll dive into the discussion topic then. The 1.3.1 patch release.
Yeah, so just following up from Nolan's discussion on this PR around the conversion issues with CRDs. So yeah, I think we can and should push out a 1.3.1. I think it's fine to go ahead and do it today. I mean, I think this will be the only issue in it. I took a quick look through the commit history, and I don't think there's really anything else that we would want to cherry pick into this. So we'll have to, Nolan will have to create a 1.3 branch off of the 1.3 tag, and then cherry pick this commit into there, and then probably make a bunch of docs updates, because we have, you know, anywhere in like the upgrade instructions or anything like that, we're going to need to increment the version number, do the change log.
And I don't think you had mentioned in Slack we haven't really done the patch release process in a while. Like I don't think we've done the patch release since changing our release notes process with the unreleased stuff. Shouldn't be a big deal since it's just one release note this time, but
yeah. So yeah,
should only be one commit. Well, nope, sorry, 7, or did it get squashed?
I think I squashed it, so makes it easier to cherry pick.
Yeah.
Yeah, so maybe you and I can just we can put together a game plan of all the different things we need to do, and then we can work through it together.
Okay.
So would that the patch release, would that impact everyone on 1.3.0 right now? Or would you recommend everyone upgrade, essentially?
I would say everyone on 1.3.0 should probably upgrade, because what this does is basically if you try to back up a CRD that has a whole number, nope, I wasn't talking to Siri. If you try to back up a CRD with a whole number in one of the fields that is defined as a float, which is usually like a maximum, a minimum, or I forget what the third one is, but that could be in the top level or any number of subfields. If you try to back that up, it's going to break that back up, or it'll fail on that particular resource. So 1.3.1 would be required to get consistent backups and usable backups. So yeah, I would say it's a required upgrade.
Will this bug appear at all Kubernetes versions, or is this specific to that 1.16 and later stuff?
It's going to be any Kubernetes version that has CRDs stored at V1 or above. Actually, no, I take that back. Any version that's going to store these numeric fields. So anyone that has schemas stored. So I think it will be below 1.16 even.
Nolan, this would only appear if the user is specifically using these fields, right? So right. If they're not populated, this issue wouldn't be hit.
Right, but it's kind of hard to know if an application you're using has CRDs that use it until you run into it. And from what I'm hearing upstream, so from what I'm understanding upstream is, and I think there may be a miscommunication, but from what I'm understanding upstream, they don't seem to think the from unstructured function that we were using should be doing this integer to float conversion. But I think that may just be a misunderstanding, because like in my test cases, the number 5.0 or any other whole number, so 2.0, 3.0, those ran into the issue. They're floats, they're valid floats, but it still caused an error. So we can work around it, but it's still kind of annoying. Helm, like Scott had reported, Helm ran into this. And that was, I'm pretty sure that was pre-1.16 too. It just really depends on your CRD
Yeah, and where I ran into it on the restore was also pre-116. The reason I was asking if it was only 116 was the fact that I didn't hit it on the backup, I only hit it on the restore. And so that's why when I reported it, when I tested it out, we found the restore case, but we didn't find the backup case. But that may have been because I wasn't testing with some recent code that you were adding in later, I'm not sure.
Yeah, so the reason this is a new bug is, so one point, you hit it on restore because on restore we were checking for readiness. Right. On restore, and I used from unstructured to basically marshal it into the Go type. And then with the whole V1 beta 1 to V1 CRD conversion that we were having to do between Kubernetes versions, I wrote this remapping plugin that basically inspected a CRD to see if it was a structural schema and what we needed to do with that. And excuse me, what I did, not really thinking about it, was I used from unstructured again. And so I reintroduced the bug in a different location. So instead of being on restore, it was now on backup in 1.3. So this is fixing the bug again, but it was basically playing whack-a-mole. So for CRDs to go into the Go type, if you got an unstructured from the Kubernetes server, unfortunately you can't use the runtime.default unstructured converter from unstructured to go straight into the Go type. Not right now anyway.
And that's our standard way of going from unstructured types, which we get back from the dynamic client, into structured types in the Velero code base. And so it's like every time we do that, if we're doing it for a CRD, we need to remember that we can't do that, and we need to go through JSON until potentially this gets changed upstream. But there's definitely more discussion that needs to happen there.
Right, and even if it gets changed upstream for 119, let's say, just to pick a number, Velero needs to be backwards compatible, and not everybody's going to be on 119 tomorrow, because a lot of people aren't even on 116 yet. So we can't immediately shift.
Well,
you're right.
It would just be a matter of us updating our dependency.
Yeah.
It's not an issue with the data coming back from the API server. It's just the conversion function that we're using within Velero.
Right. And I was even having a hard time replicating it, because if I did the JSON structure and did to unstructured, and that all worked fine. It's if it came from the Kubernetes server into unstructured and then I did from unstructured, then it would fail. If I take the unstructured, put it in JSON, then unmarshal the JSON back into the Go type directly, then that worked. So it's that specific code path, which somebody on the Helm chart has a fix for it. It's a fairly small fix, but the code in the Kubernetes repo is fairly old. So I think it's going to just require some more communication with the upstream maintainers to clarify what's going on.
Nolan, how prevalent do you think 1.3.0 users will see this issue? Any idea?
I think it's going to be fairly prevalent. So some of the CRDs that folks were sending me were with like Cert Manager. One of them that really confused me was they had the CSI CRDs, which were failing, which that one really confused me because they weren't the same definitions that Ashish and I have been working with. So I'm not sure exactly where they got those, but it's really going to come down to the CRDs that you use. So like I haven't tried this with Istio, for example, but if they have a well-defined API with maximums, minimums, things like that, it's gonna, if it's a strict API, it's going to hit you.
I'm really just asking to figure out, like, how should we communicate the urgency of upgrading from 1.3.0 to 1.3.1? I think it depends on how likely folks are to run into it. So.
I mean, if they run into it, they'll know because they'll get a failure on a backup.
Unless they're not watching scheduled backups, something like that, unless they don't have the appropriate monitoring and things like that. So hopefully you're right, Steve. Okay.
It should fail the backup and it should result in those metrics that we have, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. That's.
I would argue that an unobserved backup is not a backup.
An unobserved and unrestored backup is not a backup. Indeed. Yeah. Yes. Sure.
All right, so we'll work on getting the 1.3 out. See if we can get it out today, or if not, tomorrow. 1.3.1.
That was great. Yeah, we'll make sure to blast the social media channels and Slack and everything once that's done. All right. Last thing here, screen again, is of course the contributor shoutouts.
And I think these were all me. I think I've said most of them already, but thank you again to Guy333 and Mrs. Sure I'm pronouncing this wrong, but Mrs. Snap for the reports, the CRD data, the YAML files, and the testing. I was able to get them. They offered to test an early image on the CRD issue. And also, I think this the node port stuff on services with 2308. I think we've been chasing that for a little while. I know in that issue, there's another one. There's another issue referenced, and there wasn't a reproduction case on that previous issue. But thank you, Anthony Bett, for providing a reproduction case, because that was super helpful in tracking this down.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Nolan. Yeah, so for that one, I'll be available to follow up with, if you need any more help on that. So it seems to be a really edge case with the restore for the node port, and at least for now, seems that like that one provides a way to reproduce it most of the time.
Yeah, that one, it's just there's an error with validating the allocating ports is basically just a wrapper around a struct that counts up, and if it can't count up anymore, it just returns an error that says I can't allocate anymore, and that gets bubbled up all the way through the REST API.
Right.
And that comes back through K8s as invalid instead of, oh, that port already exists. So yeah, we need to revisit that one way or another in Velero.
Yeah. Also, it seems for the node port, the API server actually validates first it checks if if any of the node ports have been allocated, and then from there it now goes to check if there, for example, a service within that namespace exists with the same name. So it looks like the validation is first for the node port allocation, and then next is the name of the service object.
That makes sense. So it looks at that counter before it looks at any of the Kubernetes logic. It looks to see that. Yep. So even if that would be allocated in a different namespace,
it will still fail.
It'll still fail. Yeah. So that makes the issue a little bit trickier.
Yeah, I was thinking for that one because if there's a service in a different namespace that is using that node pod, then it's an actual error, and I think the restore should fail, rightly so. But if it's in the same namespace, then I think in that case we can scope it to that namespace. Otherwise, definitely we don't want to scan through all the namespaces to validate that. I don't think we will want to do that. But if you can just copy it within the namespace, then if you find that same service, then we can just handle it the way we're handling the other objects. If there's a service that is utilizing that node port in a different namespace, then I don't think we can really do much there.
Makes sense, and that actually makes sense why they would check that first.
Yeah.
In that case. Yeah, and for context on this is where if you have a service, for those that aren't familiar with the case, you have a service that you're trying to restore. In the reproduction case, the service already exists in the namespace, and when you try to restore it with the exact same port, instead of saying it already exists, it'll say that port's already in use, so it's a validation error. But there's a bunch of edge cases, so you can say, well, what if the port is already in use but by a service in a different namespace, or what if there's a bunch of different ports on the no ports on the service, or so. We need to look at some of Valero's logic for restoring objects that's not just giving the objects to the Kubernetes server and keying off an already exists error. So I think there's more discussion that needs to happen there, but the reproduction case helped move this along.
Awesome. Just a quick comment, Nolan. Your pronunciation is not that bad. It's a Swedish word, essentially. It's a nisses senap. It means nisses mustard. So yeah, you're pretty close there. All right. Do we have anything else anyone wants to talk about today as a discussion topic?
I wanted to do a demo. If we still have time, it looks like we have 20 minutes, that should be good. I'll do a demo of the CSI stuff that I spoke about. Let me start by sharing my screen. This is share. Okay, can you all see my screen?
Yep.
Font big enough?
Yeah.
Okay. So in this demo, I wanted to show how we can use Velero to perform backup and restores of applications that are using volumes backed by CSI. As I mentioned before during my status update, we will be using the V1 Beta 1 Snapshot APIs to perform the backup and restores. The Snapshot APIs were recently promoted to beta, and they are compatible Kubernetes 1.17 onwards. So for that, I have a Kubernetes 1.17 cluster here running on using kind. So this is a cluster running on my laptop, running Kubernetes 1.17. For the purposes of this demo and in the interest of time, I already did some setup. I have deployed the CSI components, which is like the CSI provisioner, CSI attacher, and all the other components along with the CSI driver on this cluster. All of them are running as individual parts. Just that kind of makes it easier for me to show what's running as against running them as sidecars. So as you can see, I have all the CSI components running, and this is the driver that we will be using. The extra containers here are like the liveness probes and one other container that I can't remember. So I have that stuff running. I have storage class corresponding to this driver all set up and ready to go, that I will be using, that will be performing the provisioning of CSI volumes and performing snapshots. So that is what is in my cluster. I also have like a sample application that I deployed to use the this is a CSI application using CSI back volumes. So I have this running in this namespace called CSI app. Clear my screen. So now I have this pod which is running using this volume claim and which is backed by this volume provisioned by the host path CSI driver. Now what we will do is we will make our app generate some data. To do that, we will just exec into this pod. Oops, not typing. Oh, wrong window. What I didn't show before was, I will show this later, but this pod mounts this volume at /data. So we, as you can see, there is like nothing in this data. Now we will kind of generate some data here. So I have this handy stuff to generate some data. I will let this run for like 3 seconds. And then this should have some data. I'm not going to cat this file because this is going to be a huge file, as you can see. So I've generated some data. Now, this is the checksum of this data. I will just keep this in mind and go into a different window, terminal window, so that we can kind of reference this back later. Now we have this application that is running, that's generated some data. Now we will use Velero to perform a backup using a command that most of you, if not all of you, know or are familiar with. I'm doing a Velero create backup. I'm going to call this backup CSI app backup demo, and I'm going to include just this namespace. So this got submitted. Let's look at the Velero logs to make sure that this backup is running. Yeah, so as you can see, it is now, as part of creating the backup, Velero will create the volume snapshots and the volume snapshot API objects, which will instruct the CSI driver to perform the snapshot operation on the volumes. So, the CSI plugin for Velero is what is taking care of all this. And as you can see, the backup is now completed, and we should be able to see the volume snapshot objects that Velero created for us to perform the backup. So I app get volume snapshot. So this is the volume snapshot that Velero created 45 seconds ago. And then I'm also going to show you the volume snapshot contents also created as part of this backup. So another quick detail here is that the volume snapshot contents are cluster scoped resource, and the volume snapshot is like a namespace scoped resource. These are kind of analogous to the relation between persistent volume claims and persistent volumes. So Velero created this backup. Now we will use this backup that Velero created to perform a restore of our namespace post disaster, just for the CSI app namespace and not for the demo, hopefully. So to do that, we will have the disaster namespace CSI app. we will just delete this namespace. And one other detail while we wait for this namespace to be deleted is I have set up the volume snapshots to be retained. You can say, so this policy basically says, should this volume snapshot content stick around if the associated volume snapshot goes away? So I've set it up to be retained in case the volume snapshot gets deleted. Now, once this namespace goes away, we will go back to verify that the volume snapshot contents exist. My session here got terminated, so the part got killed. So waiting for this. Okay, the namespace is now deleted. And then we will verify that this still exists, but this doesn't. Okay, now we are ready to restore. Well, not quite. This is like the workaround that I mentioned for the bug. This is a workaround for the bug that I mentioned during my update. We will have to. So what happened right now is the volume snapshot object got deleted, but the reference to that object in the volume snapshot content still exists. So that should have been cleared up, and that's the bug that has been opened. So we will go in and clear it up ourselves for now as a workaround. So CSI edit. This is what I want to edit. This is what I want to edit, and this is the reference. This is the dangling reference to the volume snapshot that got left behind. So we will delete these two lines and save and exit. Now to perform a restore, we will again use a command that is velero create restore, and we will be referencing the backup that we created before. So this is the command that we are running, velero create restore. This is I'm going to call this restore this, and this is from the backup that we created. So I'm going to do this. This is going to create the namespace pod and and also with the data that we generated. So let's take a peek at the logs. Okay, the restore is complete. As part of the restore, what Velero did is it used the volume snapshot as the data source for the persistent volume claim to populate the data back onto the volume that was going to be provisioned for that claim. So we will take a look at that later. But before that, we will make sure that our namespace is back, our application is back and running. So as you can see, the namespace is back. CSI get pods. I want to see PVC, and then I also want to see the PV. So we see our application is happily running with this volume claim that was created 65 seconds ago, and then this persistent volume that was provisioned 65 seconds ago. So this all guarantees that our pod came back, but did our volume, the data that we wrote here into the volume, did this come back? So let's just exec into that pod again and verify that that came back. So ls data. Okay, that file exists, so that's a good sign. And then the checksum of the data also checks out, which is the same. So Velero was able to create this data back for us using the VolumeSnapshot APIs exactly the way it was in the snapshot. So that's been my demo. And I don't know if we have enough time to do like a cluster migration scenario. So we'll probably have to do that again sometime later. If folks have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Ashish, I wanted to clarify one thing. So that dangling reference, that should only be there in the case where you have an existing cluster, but you deleted the namespace cleanly, correct?
Yes.
Any other questions, comments for Ashish, the demo here?
Hi, Ashish. This is Chen.
Yep.
May I ask one question? I'm a little bit confused about the checksum. So how it works? It's like a hash code or what?
Yeah, so the checksum is like a Linux utility. So
I think Ashish was just using that in. Oh, sorry.
As to verify that the data is valid. So or is the same.
Oh, like check the identity of it.
This is like checksum of blocks. This is like a Unix utility which you can use to validate the data is same. It's like hash, something like hash.
So it's a really big file, and you didn't want to cat it because it would just like fill up the screen. So that just shows that it was the same after restore that it was on backup.
So if I cat this file, it will be this, and there is no way to verify that. So
okay, that makes sense.
This makes it easier to.
Verify. So that's why I use the checksum to check whether it's the original one.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I had a question for you, Ashish. Good demo, by the way. So what happens? I guess this will also work with namespace mapping, right? If I do a restore and I want to map it to a different namespace than the original one.
That's a good question. Yeah. It should work, but there is more cleanup that will have to be done.
Mm-hmm.
So if you look at the volume snapshot content, let me show you the volume snapshot content. I will not edit, but if you look at the volume snapshot content, the reference here is the volume snapshot and in which namespace.
Right.
So we will have to clear this reference also for this namespace. So when Velero performs the restore, it is going to see that this volume snapshot content object already exists, and it's going to say, hey, I'm not going to touch this because this is a resource that's already there. And I'm going to proceed with the other parts of the restore that I have to do. But then this reference will kind of will kind of stick around, and that won't let the namespace mapping to go through. However, I have another issue that I have opened in the Upstream external snapshotter repo that also I showed in my demo. So that is not in my demo, in my status update. So that is this one. Where'd it go? So not this, but this one. So here, if you look at it, if I want to restore this into a different namespace, in the same cluster, there's like a one-to-one mapping between a volume snapshot, which is a namespace scope resource, and a volume snapshot content, which is a cluster scope resource, which is what prevents you from having multiple references. So this issue is basically saying it should be possible to have one volume snapshot content be referencing or be referenced in multiple volume snapshot objects across namespaces.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, but the workaround there is like you go in and clean up the namespace as well, so that the namespace mapping will kind of go through. The other thing that you could possibly do is not have a retain policy on the volume snapshot content, and let the volume snapshot content also go away, But then there is another problem there, which is the lifecycle management of the Kubernetes objects should not be tied to the lifecycle of the snapshot in the storage provider. So if you delete the volume snapshot object in Kubernetes, the CSI driver should not kind of immediately delete the volume snapshot content in, or the volume snapshot in the storage provider. If it still sticks around, you can use that snapshot handle to provision more volumes. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense. It's almost like a static input.
Yeah.
And I think Xing said she's going to put these issues on the working group discussion tomorrow, the data protection working group.
Awesome. Well, if we don't have any extra comments here, thank you so much, Ashish, for the demo. Thank you everyone for the input and comments as well. And yeah, looking forward to the next demo for cluster migration, maybe next week. Or so. That'd be awesome. With that, have a fantastic week, everyone. And yeah, hope to see you during the next meeting. Have a good one.
See ya. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.